Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ken Moore from the Department of Musical Instruments, and I'm here to tell you about Silk and Bamboo. This is a collaborative exhibition which has been put together by the Departments of Musical Instruments and Asian Art. My co-curator for this exhibition was James C.Y. Watt, who has been a collaborator in certain ways because we've been thinking about doing this show for quite some time. The opportunity came when our regular musical instrument galleries up on the second floor had to be closed for renovations to the roof. So we were looking for several projects to do within the building, and this was one of the ones that we could do. The Department of Egyptian Art was very nice to lend us their special exhibition gallery, so I hope that after the lectures and the performance today, you will go across the hall and look at the exhibition. This exhibition is really about 8,000 years of continuous music making in China. And so today's lecture is kind of a music lesson. The exhibition is in collaboration with a Carnegie Hall Festival, and which will start on October 21st. So I hope that everyone will be able to hear some of the performances there and also some of the ongoing lectures and performances here. The title of our exhibition refers to the 3rd century BC classification of musical instruments. Instruments were organized in 8 categories that were part of a system to organize and complement cosmological assumptions and concepts. This system was represented by the 8 trigrams you see, and all the trigrams had various attributes to go along with them. One of those attributes was resonating materials, and this is where musical instruments comes in. First one was stone. What you see on the screen is a jade stone carved in an L shape. It's called a qing, and you strike it and it produces a single tone. There were several ranks of these on frames, and you play them like a bell set almost. Another stone instrument could be a flute when made out of jade. This instrument, the shou, is jade. It has a little notch at the top and finger holes. Another category is earth, and these are instruments made of pottery. Again, flutes can be in that category too if they're made out of porcelain. Here we see a kind of instrument that's an ocarina, played and found since the Tang dynasty, many millennia ago. Bamboo is another classification, and it's mostly flutes that are made out of that material. Skin is another, so drums would fall into that classification. Gourd, anything from a gourd would be considered in this category, but the sheng, which as you can see does not particularly have a gourd associated with it, is in that classification. This area here, this is actually a mouth organ, and this area here was originally a gourd. Inside the instrument are little metal tongues, which if you see the little holes here, when you blow or even suck the air from it, you can produce a sound. It's the only instrument in China which originally made more than one note at one given time. This is also where, in Europe, the idea of harmonicas, reed organs, concertinas, that type of instrument comes from. So this is something that directly affected instruments in Europe. as far as a symbol, you might notice the reeds here. They're folded like a phoenix wings, and they're arranged to mimic the phoenix wings. Another classification is wood. So we have instruments like this, which is actually a clapper, which would keep time, or an instrument like this, which would be used to keep rhythm during Buddhist ritual. You see that it's a fish, in the shape of a fish, and when it would be played, you lay it down and strike it on the red beater, or area there. Whoops, I am going ahead here. The fish itself is a Buddhist emblem of wakefulness, of always being aware of your surroundings, because it was believed that the fish did not have eyelids and therefore was always awake. Under silk, we have any instrument with silk strings. This would be the long zithers that you sometimes see, and also the pipa, a lute. Now, under metal, we have things like cymbals, a set of small gongs like this, again, which are tuned in various pitches so that you can play a tune out of them. Also, trumpets. In addition to the various materials and classifications, this system had directions which were related to it, kinship ideas related to it, and different types of seasons, and many more than what we see on the screen, actually. So you can see this is a cosmological system as well as a system to classify musical instruments. We took silk and bamboo, which is basically strings and winds, for the title of the show, because this term, silk and bamboo, has become synonymous with music in China. So basically our title means music. Since this is a show that, unlike the lecture you heard before, consists of artists that are unknown, they're three-dimensional objects, and they're objects that serve music as well as the visual arts. And also, since we cover 8,000 years, I thought I would give you this sort of timeline so that we could go through quickly with some of the ideas and instruments in China, starting about 8,000 years ago with these red crane bone flutes. These are some of the oldest and probably the oldest playable instruments in the world. These were found a few years ago and made quite became quite celebrities because they could be played. The holes are very carefully drilled. It also shows advanced technology of being able to drill holes in particular places that you'll get particular tones. The term inblown means that we're sort of looking at them in a horizontal way, but they were actually played vertically, blowing into one in and then fingering them this way, as I'm doing. Moving several thousand years forward, we come to a period where there is evidence, these are all archaeological evidence that we come across, of the ocarinas, of the beginning of those L-shaped chimes, sometimes very much looking like stone with perhaps decoration on them. We also start getting bronze instruments, drums with skin, with drums made out of clay, and also bells. There is also evidence of the sheng, or the mouth organ that I spoke about before. which is very interesting because already at this very early period, we're seeing the use of metal and different materials working together to make up a musical instrument, thinking very much about how do I tune something, how do I put this technology to use in the service of music. Moving forward to the Shang dynasty, these chimes, these stone chimes, start to become more refined. They take on that L shape that has become familiar. Also, there's the beginning of instruments which are kind of iconic to the Eastern Asia. The idea of a zither, a long zither, a board with strings running end to end. Here we have an example of what I would call a proto-su. A su is a long zither, plucked, as you see, rested on the lap and plucked with the hands. This instrument is a little different than the instrument we see today. The term is still with us, and this is true of several instruments. The term stays with us, but the form of the instrument changes. So this is a proto-su, not one that you would see being played today. Something else that is happening is a high technology in the use of bronze. There are bronze drums, but importantly, there are bronze bells. This is called a nao, and about 3 to 5 would have been played in an ensemble. And you can see that it's characterized by an elliptical mouth. Now, this mouth allows you to play 2 tones, a high technology, and these 2 tones are very precise. The way this happens is, if you strike the center, one set of nodes and antinodes are generated, producing one pitch. If you strike it on the side, another set of nodes are set into vibration and create a different pitch. Now, when you have a whole series of these bells together, you can then have a whole melody line of music going on. And this becomes important. We're just starting this idea here, but I want to show you another type of bell called a zhong that I just happen to have under the desk here with a beater. And this is a fake. This is not a real bell, but I mean, it is a real bell, but it's not a real archaeological piece by any means. But you can see there's a loop back here on the back, which allows you to hang it on a frame. This is very heavy, by the way. The way you play it, just like the bell we're looking on the screen, is to strike the center. You get one very nice sustained sound. Then if you strike it on the side, did you hear the difference? I'll do it again. Hear that? There, that's better. I don't have the great technique for it. One of the reasons why we knew this was a fake was that the interval that you usually get when striking these instruments is a third, and this is a second. And that set us wondering about it. We also then looked on the inside to see if it was tuned in any way, or to see if there were extra pieces of metal to help tune it. And there weren't. It just is, the inside is pretty much corroded like the outside. So we did some tests on it and determined that it was probably a 19th century forgery. But it is good for demonstrating. And we keep it to weigh down things, so it's very heavy. During this period also, we start the beginnings of writing about music, or actually getting terms that are found on oracle bones. Now, these can be tortoise shell, different type of animal bones, and what these are on the oracle bones are pictographs. And those pictographs actually later become writing. And if you look, if one knows calligraphy, Chinese calligraphy, you can look at the pictographs and still today figure out what it is that they're referring to. So this is what's happening, and they refer to drums like this, pole drums. They refer to the bells that I just showed you. And they also refer to these mouth organs. So we know all of this is going on during this period. And there's quite a lively musical life going on. At this time, another prototype for an instrument called the chin is seen. And it looks something like this. It doesn't look like the modern chin at all. And again, this is the same as the su. The name stays around, but the form changes. We also have different types of drums coming in and being invented, and we get true writings about folk festivals, about divination, about how you would use music in various forms. Now, the type of bell I played for you is this, and this is called a chong. And it too has the two pitches, but it is a little more elaborate in design, a little more symbolic with fields of what we call nipples at the top, a barren area for decoration at the bottom. These were suspended in frames, which we'll see in just a few minutes. We're also coming to the period of Confucius, and this is important because the ethics of music are established at this time. Who should play what types of music, what that music might do to your spirit. And these principles follow through the rest of the history of Chinese music, really. Also during this period, there was a very important, from the musical point of view, person who was buried. This was the Marquis of Yi. And the Marquis of Yi was buried with 120 musical instruments. He was also buried with 13 attendants, lady attendants, whose graves you can see on the left. His tomb is actually on the right. The center is where the musical instruments were found. And this was a tremendous find because it allowed us to really understand what was going on with music in ancient times in China. We don't have this kind of information for Europe or any place else, really. So this documentation was very important because all these bells were well preserved, the drums were well preserved, and when they were put together, again, in supported frames, this is what it looks like. So you can see that the bells, the chong, that I showed you before, would be arranged like this in an ensemble, and they were usually struck with hammers that were T-shaped, or the larger ones might have been struck with just long poles. So today you can hear recordings of this ensemble, actually reproduction of this ensemble, and occasionally they tour with these instruments too. It's quite lively music and quite wonderful. These bells actually, as you could see, the bell I had was sustained for quite a while, which meant that the music was probably fairly slow and stately. Although we do have depictions of these bells being played for accompanying wine drinking and that kind of thing. So I don't know what the rhythms were for those. During this period, about between 300 and 400 BC, we start seeing the beginnings of silk route trade. It's not the huge silk route that we think of today, but it's the beginnings. And some instruments were coming in from India, coming from northern India around the Taklamakan Desert, and coming into areas where Buddhist settlements were. Dong Huang was one of them, and there were, in those caves there are paintings and depictions of people playing musical instruments that are being brought in through the dissemination of religion, really. So harps are beginning. Then we have a very rich period of writing about music and codifying musical practices. Our classification system begins. They divide types of music into different genres and identify these genres. There are the books of rights discuss different principles of making music. Very rich time. There's also the beginning of musical notation. Now, some of the musical notation refers to pitches which are relative. In other words, they're not fixed pitches. But by the 3rd century BC, we actually have fixed pitches. So again, from the point of view of being musically advanced, we're really, China's really a little ahead of everybody else by codifying all these things and leaving records for us to know about this material. What happens next is kind of unfortunate. During the Qin dynasty, many of these books, many of the notation systems, the things that have been notated, are destroyed. The court music disappears, and there's a kind of realignment of everything. By destroying everything, you realign the civilization, put it under your control, and move forward. So this is what's happening. Of course, this is also the time that the Great Wall was beginning to be built. But what happens next is more positive. We have an intellectual revival, and we have the beginnings of the Qin tradition in its modern form. The little chart coming up shows you the old Qin that we saw before and various other forms that were tried before this last form begins. The Qin, at this point, becomes a very important instrument, particularly to the literati. You can see that we have a jikang composing a piece, playing a piece, out under a pine tree. There's incense burning. We can see the foot of a companion that's probably there listening. This was all part of the culture of the Qin. One would play the instrument for oneself, would express your deepest emotions, and only your most intimate friend would know or be able to understand what you were saying with your instrument. The Qin had a lot of symbolic cosmology attached to it. The upper board is symbolic of heaven, the lower board would be earth, and then the human being connects these things by playing the instrument. And these are 7 twisted silk strings. Those little dots along the line are called hui. They are places to help you position your fingers. The instrument that we're looking at is a Ming dynasty instrument. It's number 18 of about 100 or so instruments. You can see that it looks kind of worn, and this makes it a venerated instrument. We want that instrument to look worn. It's got a lacquer surface that has flecks of gold in it and other materials. And as you wear it away through use, those flecks of gold come up, and sometimes it looks like a russet stain on the instrument. But these are positive qualities for the instrument, as it shows it's been used, it's been loved, it's been played. This particular instrument, like many qin, have inscriptions on the back. The one is its name, capital Peace. The seal that you see on this side is, it tells you that it's an heirloom of the Liu dynasty. It also has a poem on the back. This inscription reads, "The moonlight is being reflected by the river Yangtze. A light breeze is blowing over clear dewdrops. Only a tranquil place can comprehend the feeling of eternity." And this really is kind of a summary of the philosophy of playing this instrument. You can see why you would play it under pine trees for your best friend. It's an instrument of contemplation. During during the first century AD, we have an organization called Eurofoo, which is a bureau that is established by the government to set pitches, to supervise ceremonies, to hire musicians, to collect various regional types of music, and they also established large orchestras. Now, this particular bureau stayed under the government until 1912. So it is a bureau which has lasted a long, long time during the history of Chinese music. Also, the Silk Road is now in full swing. There are lots of outside influences coming into China and lots of different types of instruments that are being introduced. Among them are the lute and the harp, the sham, different types of trumpets, and hourglass-shaped drums. Coming into a period which was a little, had conflict going on, the Qin is at its height. The pipa, which is the lute, coming from West Asia, is becoming more and more popular. And we get the sham, or the suona, coming from the north and from the west. These double reed instruments are coming in with the traders from the Silk Road. Also, there are various types. The north and the south have different likes and dislikes. In the north, we have more military, loud, outdoor instruments, is what I call them, the pipa. And in the south, you have quieter instruments, which are reflective of influences coming from India. You can see in this brick, this is a brick, which shows you some military instruments, the side drums being beaten with a mallet, and also the drummers are holding another type of drum that you would twist. There are 3 little drums on that pole, and you twist that, and they're strings which hit against the heads of the drums, which create a nice rhythm as you're walking along. The 2 other people are playing trumpets that have curves in them and also banners flying from them. China begins to unify the court. Music is revived, and we begin, so at this point, a kind of international period where lots of different outside influences are actually recognized officially. And there during this period, 10 different types of musical styles, all associated with the name of a place. So you can see the Samarkand, Kuchka was another one, which was a really popular type of music that was being played. The arts are supported by the government. The female musicians were also coming from the West and playing. Later they become what we call tea house girls. And the pipa becomes the dominant lute during this. The things that are kind of dying out at this point are the chin and the harp. The harp pretty much goes and ends during this period. The chin still stays around and is still with us today. At the end of this period, government support lacks, and the musicians have to find other ways of supporting themselves. But talking about the influences from outside, you have the Silk Road, and you have the merchants coming across on their camels, bringing very different types of instruments. But here you have a pipa, that is the lute that comes, that in the Arabic world today is called the oud. It's an instrument that travels across China, becomes very, very popular, and even goes to Japan under the guise of spreading Buddhism. And there it's called a biwa. Here you can see different foreigners playing various instruments that are coming into China. Again, you see the pipa being played, and here again is a pipa player. And I just want you to notice that the pipa player is playing it like a guitar, and she's holding a plectra. Whoops, what am I doing? In her hand, which is striking the strings. And that's how it gets its name. When you strike downward, it's P. When you bring it back up, it's Pa. The harp on the end here is by this time dying out. So this little pottery figure is really one of the last to to use that kind of instrument. Now we're into the Ming dynasty, and the pipa that we have on display is a tour de force of carving, ivory carving. You can see that on the back of the instrument, there are about 110 ivory plaques of various deities, Buddhist symbols, Taoist symbols, Confucian symbols, and it's just an amazing beehive of all these various auspicious symbols. The instrument, the symbols are arranged symmetrically across the back. On the other sides here you see there's a butterfly and maybe a plum blossom. Then the next two are Buddhist emblems. The next two are deities, and then in the middle is the symbol for the mushroom or fungus. And the whole back is decorated like that. The upper part of the neck continues this decoration with bone carving and very delicate work at the top. Turning it around, we have a bat at the top, which is a good luck symbol, and on the string holder, images of men meeting together. I think they've been fishing. There's a little bridge in the back there. Now, of course, the back of this instrument that's ornamented so much is the part that you don't see when you're playing it. So we're not sure what the purpose of this instrument was, because there is signs that it had been played. Another ivory piece from the Ming dynasty is this paipan, which is a clapper. And this is just one half of the clapper. You see the little holes at the top. It has lotuses all over it. The holes, actually, you string through there, and there should be another clapper to help you keep time when you're making music. A little fragile for a clapper. Now we come into another chaotic period. This is when a lot of Mongolian influences are coming in, particularly instruments we call huqins, which are fiddles. And they kind of take over in the theater and popular music. The pipa players get rid of that plectra that we saw and turn the instrument upright a little bit and start playing with their fingers in a very programmatic way. And these become national styles. More percussion instruments come in. So there's this continuous influence coming from the north instead of from the west. One of the things that comes is this set of gongs that we talked about before, sometimes referred to as the cloud gongs. And of course, the stringed instruments, the bowed stringed instruments, become standard at this point. We also get our first printed music. This is right after 1300. Again, a little bit ahead of European cultures. And then in the Ming dynasty, we have the Qin revival and the introduction of instruments from Europe, like this dulcimer. This is a 19th century yangqin. You'll see a large yangqin in the concert today, which is the modern one, much more complicated in its construction than this. Our show actually ends at about 1911, so that's why we have this 19th century version. What happens then is that all these instruments are used in ensembles, various types of music, and then in 1912 we have the dissolving of the Bureau of Music. There are a lot of Western influences happening, and I'm going to end it there because we all want to hear the music. But that's your 8,000 years of Chinese music in just a few minutes.